While the battle over towing RVs intensifies in LA, the moratorium to stop it is now over, and that means hundreds of homeless could be removed from where they have parked.
America didn't wake up one day with 900,000 people living in RVs. This didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen overnight. It happened because rent exploded, wages stalled, and the housing system quietly stopped working. What you're about to see isn't a lifestyle trend, it's a warning. The figure 900,000 Americans living in RVs is not an estimate pulled from lifestyle trends or social media. It reflects a convergence of housing displacement, vehicle dwelling data, RV registration changes, and homelessness reporting that has quietly accelerated since 2020. What makes this number critical is not just its size, but its speed. Just a decade ago, full-time RV dwelling was considered fringe. Today, it rivals the population of San Francisco or Austin. This number matters because it represents people who fell outside every existing safety net. They are not counted in traditional homeless shelters. They are not captured in rental statistics. They exist in a gray zone, housed enough to be invisible, homeless enough to be unstable. That invisibility delays response, funding, and policy action. The 900,000 figure also signals a structural shift. RV living is no longer seasonal, voluntary, or transitional. Data from municipal vehicle counts, overnight enforcement reports, and RV sales transfers show a sustained rise in long-term vehicle habitation. In many metro areas, RV residency has increased 300 to 400% since 2018, with some cities reporting 5,000 to 10,000 RV residents where there were once just hundreds. This matters because housing systems are designed around permanence, leases, mortgages, zoning. RV homelessness bypasses all of that. When nearly 1 million people are living outside the formal housing system, it means the system is no longer absorbing economic shocks. It's deflecting them. This number is not a trend. It's a warning that the housing system has entered a failure phase where displacement happens faster than recovery. The reality of RV homelessness looks nothing like the van life image. Data from city outreach programs, school districts, and employment surveys shows that most RV dwellers are actively employed or recently employed. These are warehouse workers, nurses' aides, retail managers, construction workers, delivery drivers, and gig workers whose income no longer aligns with housing costs. Studies indicate that 60 to 70% of RV homeless individuals maintain some form of employment. A significant share are families with children. School districts in California, Washington, Arizona, and Florida have reported tens of thousands of students listing vehicles or RVs as their primary residence. In Los Angeles County alone, over 15,000 students were identified as vehicle residents in recent counts. These children attend school daily, often without teachers knowing they are homeless. Another major group is seniors on fixed incomes. Social Security averages around $1,900 per month, while median rents in many states now exceed $2,000. For retirees without paid-off homes, RVs become the only remaining asset they can live in without qualifying for shelters. An estimated 100,000 to 150,000 seniors now live in RVs out of necessity. Veterans are also overrepresented, comprising roughly 12 to 15% of the RV homeless population. Despite benefits, many face medical costs, disabilities, or long wait times for housing assistance. RV living becomes a stopgap that quietly turns permanent. What unites these groups is not lifestyle choice, it's exclusion. They earn too much for shelters, too little for rent, and have no access to long-term affordable housing. Between 2019 and 2024, average U.S. rents increased by 30 to 40%, while median wages rose closer to 5 to 8%. In some metro areas like Phoenix, Austin, and Tampa, rent increases exceeded 50%. In Miami, average rents jumped from $1,600 to over $2,800 in just 4 years. This imbalance is the single largest driver pushing people into RVs. Housing affordability is typically measured by the 30% rule. Housing should not exceed 30% of income. Today, over 11 million renters spend 50 to 70% of their income just to stay housed. That leaves no margin for emergencies. One car repair, medical bill, or missed shift becomes catastrophic. When rent increases renew annually, displacement compounds. A tenant paying $1,400 can suddenly face $1,900 at renewal. That $500 gap equals $6,000 per year, an impossible adjustment for most households without raises. For someone earning $18 per hour, that $500 increase represents 28 additional work hours monthly just to break even. Wages, meanwhile, are constrained by labor markets, automation, and corporate cost controls. Even full-time workers earning $22 per hour bring home roughly $3,500 per month before deductions. In cities like Seattle, Denver, or Boston, that doesn't cover rent, utilities, insurance, and food. RV living emerges as a math solution, not a lifestyle. It reduces housing costs temporarily, but shifts expenses into fuel, maintenance, and instability. Rent inflation doesn't just cause eviction, it redefines survival. RV homelessness is what happens when rent grows faster than income for too long. Job loss is the trigger that turns housing stress into homelessness. Since 2020, the U.S. has experienced waves of layoffs across tech, logistics, retail, manufacturing, and healthcare support roles. In 2023 alone, over 260,000 tech workers lost jobs, while retail shed another 150,000 positions. Even short-term layoffs have long-term housing consequences. Most Americans lack emergency savings. Federal data shows nearly 60% of households cannot cover a $1,000 emergency without debt. The median savings account balance sits at just $1,200. When layoffs hit, severance is limited or non-existent, and unemployment benefits often cover only 40 to 50% of prior income, sometimes delayed for weeks. Housing costs do not pause during layoffs. Rent, utilities, insurance, and debt payments continue. Within 60 to 90 days, many households exhaust savings. Evictions follow quickly, especially in states with weak tenant protections. In some states, eviction proceedings can begin after just 5 days of non-payment. Once evicted, re-entry becomes difficult. Eviction records raise future housing costs, require higher deposits, or lead to outright denial. Background checks now reveal evictions for 7 years. RVs become the only asset people can live in without approval checks. This creates a chain reaction: layoff, missed rent, eviction, vehicle living, job instability, permanent displacement. RV living often makes employment harder due to lack of address, hygiene access, and constant relocation. Layoffs don't just remove income. They accelerate housing collapse for people already stretched thin by rent inflation. RVs filled a gap left by systemic housing shortages. The U.S. faces a deficit of 7 million affordable housing units, particularly for low and middle-income households earning $30,000 to $60,000 annually. Shelters are overcrowded, temporary, and often unsuitable for families, seniors, or people with jobs. In major cities, shelter wait lists exceed 10,000 people, with average wait times stretching 18 months to 3 years. RVs offer privacy, storage, mobility, and the illusion of control. For displaced households, they represent autonomy when every other option disappears. RV ownership avoids credit checks, deposits, waiting lists, and zoning delays. A used RV can be purchased for $5,000 to $15,000, far less than typical housing deposits and first month's rent combined in expensive metros. During the pandemic, vehicle living surged as eviction moratoriums expired and rents reset higher. Between 2020 and 2022, RV sales spiked by 40%, with much of that increase driven by housing displacement rather than recreation. RVs became the fastest accessible form of shelter, purchasable, movable, and immediately livable. But safety nets are meant to catch people briefly. RVs were never designed for permanent habitation. They lack insulation, durability, medical accessibility, and cost efficiency long-term. Repairs alone can exceed $5,000 to $10,000 unexpectedly. The problem is not that people chose RVs, it's that nothing replaced them. Affordable housing construction lagged. Public housing waitlists stretched into years. Assistance programs capped out quickly. RVs became the last safety net because every other one failed. Local governments didn't plan for RV homelessness, but decades of zoning and land use decisions made it inevitable. Most U.S. cities restrict multifamily housing to small areas, while over 70% of residential land remains zoned for single-family homes only. In cities like San Jose and Seattle, less than 15% of land permits apartments or multifamily construction. This artificially limits supply and drives prices upward. At the same time, cities approved luxury developments because they generate higher tax revenue. Between 2015 and 2023, over 80% of new housing units built in major metros were marketed at rents exceeding $2,500 monthly. Affordable housing projects move slowly, face opposition, or are blocked entirely. As a result, new housing production skewed toward units renting at $2,500 to $4,000 per month, far beyond what median earners can afford. Property taxes also surged. In some counties, tax bills rose 20 to 40% in 5 years, pushing landlords to raise rents or sell. Tenants absorbed the impact. In Austin, average property taxes increased 55% between 2018 and 2023. Cities also removed informal living options. Long-term motel conversions were shut down. SRO housing, which once provided 500,000 to 600,000 affordable units nationwide, disappeared. Industrial zones that once tolerated vehicle living were rezoned or enforced. The result is displacement without destination. Cities created demand they refused to supply. When residents fall out of the housing system, RVs become the only form of shelter that doesn't require zoning approval. RV homelessness is not a failure of individuals adapting. It's the predictable outcome of cities prioritizing property values over livability. RV living only works if parking exists. That foundation is collapsing rapidly. Over the past 5 years, hundreds of cities enacted overnight parking bans, time limits, and vehicle length restrictions. What was once tolerated is now criminalized. Between 2019 and 2024, over 400 municipalities introduced or strengthened vehicle dwelling ordinances. Retail parking lots that once allowed overnight stays, including major chains, reversed policies after pressure from municipalities and insurers. Walmart alone closed overnight access at thousands of locations. By 2023, only 30% of Walmart stores permitted overnight RV parking, down from over 80% a decade earlier. Residential streets followed. Cities introduced 72-hour rules, then enforced them aggressively. Some added street sweeping schedules designed specifically to force vehicle movement multiple times per week. In San Diego, enforcement crews conduct sweeps 3 to 5 times weekly in targeted areas. Industrial areas, once safe zones, are being redeveloped. Empty lots are fenced. Informal parking corridors disappear. In Seattle, available overnight parking zones decreased by 60% between 2018 and 2023, while the RV population grew by over 3,000 individuals. The numbers matter. In cities like Los Angeles and San Diego, legal overnight parking capacity dropped by 40 to 60%, while RV populations continued to grow. This creates forced migration, not resolution. People aren't refusing to comply. Compliance is mathematically impossible. When parking options shrink faster than RV populations grow, displacement becomes constant. RV homelessness turns into a game of musical chairs with fewer chairs every month. RV parks are often portrayed as solutions, but they are structurally incompatible with large-scale homelessness. There are roughly 16,000 RV parks nationwide, with a combined capacity of approximately 1.2 million sites. Many are seasonal, privately owned, or restricted. Only about 40% accept long-term residents. Most parks prohibit extended stays or enforce age, income, or vehicle restrictions. Rigs older than 10 to 15 years are often rejected. Monthly rates that once averaged $400 to $600 now commonly exceed $900 to $1,500, not including utilities. In Florida and California, premium RV park rates can reach $2,000 to $2,500 monthly. Waiting lists stretch months or years. In high-demand states like Arizona, Colorado, and Oregon, vacancy rates hover near zero. Some parks convert to luxury resort models catering to tourism, not survival housing. Over 1,000 traditional RV parks have closed or converted since 2015. Zoning limits expansion. Communities oppose new RV parks due to stigma and property value concerns. As a result, capacity stagnates while demand skyrockets. Between 2018 and 2023, only 200 new RV parks opened nationwide, while the RV homeless population increased by over 400,000. For homeless RV dwellers, parks are often financially unreachable or legally inaccessible. The math doesn't work. Even a $1,000 monthly site consumes over 50% of income for someone earning $15 to $18 per hour. RV parks didn't fail RV dwellers. They were never built to absorb systemic housing collapse. RV living is often framed as cheaper, but long-term costs undermine that narrative. Fuel alone can exceed $300 to $600 per month, especially when forced to relocate frequently due to enforcement. An RV averaging 8 to 10 miles per gallon can consume 50 to 80 gallons weekly just moving between parking locations. Insurance premiums for RVs have risen sharply, with some policies increasing 20 to 35% in recent years. Annual premiums now range from $1,200 to $3,000. Many insurers refuse coverage for older rigs or full-time living, forcing people into high-risk pools or leaving them uninsured entirely. Maintenance is unavoidable. Roof leaks, electrical failures, plumbing issues, and engine repairs routinely cost $2,000 to $10,000. Tire replacements alone run $600 to $1,200 per set. Unlike housing repairs, there are no tenant protections or assistance programs. Access costs add up. Gym memberships for showers at $30 to $50 monthly, storage units at $80 to $150, propane refills at $40 to $80, dump fees at $10 to $25 per visit, and paid parking. These micro costs quietly rival rent. Monthly totals can exceed $800 to $1,200 before food or medical expenses. When breakdowns occur, people lose both shelter and transportation simultaneously. A disabled RV often leads to towing at $200 to $500, citations at $75 to $300, or impoundment at $2,000 to $4,000, compounding financial collapse. These costs trap people. They prevent savings, limit job mobility, and make exit nearly impossible. RV homelessness persists, not because it's cheap, but because it's inescapable once entered. As RV homelessness expanded, cities shifted from accommodation to enforcement. Budget allocations reflect this shift. Many municipalities now spend millions annually on towing, cleanup, and enforcement teams rather than housing solutions. Los Angeles allocates over $3 million yearly for RV enforcement, while affordable housing construction receives a fraction of that per unit. Citations accumulate quickly. Tickets range from $50 to $500 per violation. In Portland, average citations reach $250. In San Francisco, they can exceed $400. Unpaid fines lead to warrants, vehicle impoundment, or loss of registration. A single RV dweller can accumulate $2,000 to $5,000 in fines within months. Impoundment is devastating. Recovery fees can exceed $2,000, instantly stripping someone of their home. In Seattle, impound lots charge $50 to $75 daily storage, plus $400 to $600 towing. After 30 days, vehicles are auctioned. For many, this marks the transition from RV living to street homelessness. Enforcement does not reduce homelessness, it redistributes it. People are pushed from block to block, city to city, without stability. Studies show that 80 to 90% of RVs towed or displaced simply relocate within 5 to 10 miles. The numbers show the failure. Despite increased enforcement, RV populations continue to rise. What changes is visibility, not volume. When enforcement replaces housing, homelessness becomes invisible, not solved. RV dwellers are not being helped forward, they're being pushed downward. RV homelessness has quietly reached American classrooms. School districts across multiple states now report tens of thousands of students listing RVs, vans, or vehicles as their primary residence. In California alone, over 40,000 students were identified as vehicle residents in 2023. In Washington state, that number exceeds 8,000. These children are often invisible, they attend school daily, submit homework, and blend in while living without stable housing. The impact is measurable. Children living in vehicles experience higher absenteeism, lower academic performance, and increased stress-related health issues. Studies show absenteeism rates 30 to 50% higher than housed peers. Test scores fall 15 to 25% below grade level. Constant relocation disrupts school enrollment, transportation, and access to services like counseling or special education. Families face impossible trade-offs. Parking far from schools increases commute time and fuel costs. Staying near schools increases the risk of enforcement. Many parents rotate parking locations nightly to avoid citations while maintaining school attendance. Some families drive 20 to 40 miles daily just to keep children in familiar schools. Unlike shelter-based homelessness, RV living keeps families technically housed, which disqualifies them from many assistance programs. This administrative gap leaves families unsupported. Federal McKinney-Vento assistance reaches only 30 to 40% of eligible vehicle-dwelling students. The long-term cost is generational. Research consistently links housing instability in childhood to reduced lifetime earnings, increased health problems, and higher dependency on social services. RV homelessness doesn't just displace parents, it quietly reshapes childhood outcomes for tens of thousands of American children right now. Older Americans are one of the fastest growing groups entering RV homelessness. Social Security benefits average around $1,900 per month, while rents in many regions now exceed $2,000 to $2,500. In cities like San Diego, Denver, and Portland, median one-bedroom rents reach $2,300 to $2,800. The math simply no longer works. An estimated 100,000 to 150,000 seniors now live in RVs out of financial necessity. Unlike younger workers, seniors have limited income flexibility. Medical costs rise with age. Prescription expenses average $200 to $400 monthly for those with chronic conditions. Supplemental insurance, co-pays, and mobility needs compound financial pressure. For seniors spending $600 to $800 monthly on healthcare, housing becomes mathematically impossible. Many seniors once relied on modest rentals or mobile home parks, but those spaces are disappearing due to redevelopment, rising taxes, and investor buyouts. Between 2015 and 2023, over 1,000 mobile home parks closed or converted to higher-end housing. When rents rise 40 to 60% during such transitions, relocation options vanish. RV living becomes a last resort, a way to avoid shelters while maintaining dignity. However, RVs are physically demanding. Summer heat exceeding 100 degrees, winter cold below 20 degrees, maintenance tasks and accessibility challenges place seniors at high risk. Medical emergencies become life-threatening without stable addresses or nearby care. Once displaced, seniors struggle to re-enter housing markets due to credit checks, deposits, and wait lists that stretch years. RV living often becomes permanent. This is not a temporary adjustment for seniors, it's a collapse of retirement security itself. Veterans represent a disproportionate share of RV homelessness. While veterans make up roughly 6% of the general population, they comprise 12 to 15% of the RV homeless population, roughly 110,000 to 135,000 individuals. Despite benefits, many face barriers including delayed housing vouchers, disability limitations, and long approval timelines. Housing assistance programs often take months or years to process. HUD-VASH vouchers, designed to help veterans afford housing, have wait lists averaging 18 to 36 months in high-demand areas. During that gap, veterans must self-house. RVs offer autonomy and safety compared to shelters, especially for those with PTSD or medical needs. However, VA benefits alone rarely cover housing costs in high-rent areas. Disability payments may range from a few hundred to $3,800 monthly for 100% disability, insufficient where rents exceed $2,000 to $2,500. Even with maximum benefits, a disabled veteran in Seattle or Los Angeles cannot afford median rent. Veterans often avoid shelters due to safety concerns or past experiences. Shelter environments can trigger PTSD symptoms. Rigid schedules conflict with medical appointments. RV living feels like control in an otherwise rigid system. The tragedy is structural. Veterans are not failing the system. The system is failing to convert service into stability. Over 35,000 veterans remain homeless nationwide despite dedicated funding. RV homelessness among veterans highlights how benefits without accessible housing still lead to displacement. Service guarantees support in theory, but housing markets override that promise in practice. Shelters are frequently suggested as solutions, but capacity tells a different story. Nationwide, shelter beds fall millions short of demand. The U.S. maintains approximately 500,000 emergency shelter beds, while homelessness affects 650,000 to 700,000 people on any given night, not counting the 900,000 living in RVs. Many cities operate at or near full capacity year-round, with occupancy rates exceeding 95%. Shelters impose restrictions that exclude families, couples, pets, or working schedules. Most shelters enforce curfews between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., making them inaccessible for evening or night shift workers. Families are often separated by gender. Pets must be surrendered. Stay limits, typically 30 to 90 days, force repeated displacement. For RV dwellers, shelters often mean abandoning their only asset, their vehicle. Leaving an RV unattended leads to theft, vandalism, or towing within days. Losing an RV can mean losing storage, transportation, and the ability to work. Recovery costs exceed $2,000 to $5,000. Shelters are designed for crisis intervention, not long-term stability. They do not replace housing, and they do not scale to meet mass displacement. Between 2020 and 2024, shelter capacity increased by only 40,000 beds nationwide, while vehicle homelessness grew by over 400,000 people. Safety concerns deter participation. Reports of theft, assault, and communicable disease outbreaks are common. Studies show 40 to 50% of homeless individuals avoid shelters due to safety fears. RV homelessness persists because shelters were never built to absorb systemic housing failure. Temporary displacement turns permanent through attrition. Each month living in an RV drains savings through fuel, repairs, fines, and instability. Fuel costs average $300 to $600. Maintenance averages $150 to $400 monthly. Citations add $50 to $500. These expenses, totaling $800 to $1,500 monthly, consume income without building equity. Savings disappear. Credit deteriorates. Employment becomes harder. Without a fixed address, people lose job opportunities. Many employers require stable addresses for background checks and tax documentation. Hygiene access limitations reduce interview success. Sleep disruption from enforcement, temperature extremes, or parking insecurity reduces productivity. Studies show RV dwellers work 20 to 30% fewer hours than housed counterparts due to instability. Once savings hit zero, exit paths close. Housing deposits typically require first month, last month, and security deposits totaling $4,000 to $7,000 in expensive metros. Credit checks eliminate applicants with scores below 600 to 650. Background checks flag evictions. Application fees of $50 to $100 per attempt compound when rejections accumulate. What begins as a stopgap becomes a trap. After 6 to 12 months in an RV, re-entry probability drops below 20% without external intervention. After 2 years, it falls below 10%. RV homelessness hardens into permanence not through choice, but through cumulative erosion. This is how housing collapse locks people out permanently. The longer someone remains displaced, the harder escape becomes. RV living creates a deterioration spiral where time itself becomes the enemy. The rise to 900,000 RV homeless Americans is not the end state, it's the midpoint. Housing shortages persist. The U.S. still faces a deficit of 7 million affordable units. Affordable construction lags. In 2023, only 140,000 affordable housing units were completed nationwide, while 350,000 to 400,000 households lost housing. Enforcement intensifies. Over 500 municipalities introduced new vehicle dwelling restrictions between 2020 and 2024. Without intervention, RV homelessness will continue scaling upward. Current trajectories suggest the number could reach 1.2 to 1.5 million by 2027. The system is producing displacement faster than recovery. For every affordable unit built, 3 to 4 households lose housing access. This number signals a shift from episodic homelessness to structural displacement. RV living has become the buffer between economic shock and street homelessness. It absorbs people who once would have found marginal housing, extended family support, or temporary assistance. Those safety nets have collapsed. When that buffer collapses, consequences escalate quickly. Street homelessness, already affecting 250,000 to 300,000 unsheltered individuals, will surge. Public health costs will multiply. Emergency services will strain beyond capacity. RV homelessness is not a fringe issue anymore. It is a measurable indicator that America's housing system is no longer capable of absorbing pressure. Housing systems require years to build capacity, but displacement happens in months. And once systems fail at this scale, recovery becomes exponentially harder.
Now to an Eyewitness News investigation into what's essentially becoming homeless encampments on wheels. So-called van lords are renting out RVs to people who are now using them as their permanent resident.
New at 10, the Phoenix City Council is limiting medical care to homeless people in parks.
About an hour ago, after hours of discussion, the council approved the controversial ordinance that opponents believe will cost people's lives.
Something huge is happening across America, and almost no one is talking about it. In 2025, more than a dozen states are quietly pushing RV residents out, tightening laws, and clearing people from public spaces. This isn't about camping rules. It's a growing crisis forcing Americans into the shadows. Today, we expose the 16 states where this is happening. California has the largest RV dwelling population in the United States, with estimates ranging from 150,000 to over 200,000 people living in vehicles statewide. In 2025, enforcement escalated sharply after cities were granted broader authority to clear encampments and restrict vehicle habitation. Major metros like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and Oakland expanded overnight parking bans, length of stay limits, and no habitation vehicle codes. In Los Angeles alone, more than 60,000 encampment clearings were recorded annually, with many involving RVs. Housing costs are the primary driver of this crisis. Median rent exceeds $2,800 per month, while over 30% of households earn under $50,000 annually. RV living became a last resort survival strategy for seniors, disabled residents, and working families who could no longer afford traditional housing. In 2025, cities increasingly combined parking enforcement with towing authority, making displacement immediate and financially devastating. An RV tow can cost $3,000 to $10,000, instantly erasing a person's only shelter and security. Massive layoffs worsened displacement throughout the state. California lost over 300,000 tech and service jobs since 2023, pushing more people into vehicles while simultaneously criminalizing their presence on public streets. Many cities now require proof of residency or employment to access safe parking programs, effectively excluding the most vulnerable populations. The result is constant displacement, with people cycling between industrial zones, desert edges, and county borders without stable alternatives or pathways back to permanent housing. Florida enacted one of the most aggressive statewide public camping bans in the country, effective in 2024 and fully enforced throughout 2025. The law prohibits sleeping or camping on public property, including in vehicles, unless a city designates specific approved areas. RV dwellers now face fines up to $500 and mandatory relocation orders. Florida's RV homeless population surged as rents rose 25 to 30% since 2021, while wages lagged far behind housing costs. The state also experienced major layoffs across tourism, insurance, and construction sectors. Florida's property insurance crisis forced landlords to raise rents sharply, pushing retirees and fixed-income seniors into vans and RVs as their only affordable option. Unlike Western states with dispersed public lands, Florida offers extremely limited areas for legal vehicle camping. Municipal enforcement intensified dramatically in Tampa, Orlando, Miami-Dade, and Jacksonville. Police now routinely ticket RVs for sleeping in vehicles, even in industrial zones previously considered tolerable. Shelters are often full or inaccessible to couples, pet owners, or medically fragile individuals who cannot meet restrictive entry requirements. Florida reports that less than 30% of homeless shelter beds are available on any given night. In 2025, counties began coordinating enforcement across city lines, eliminating traditional safe migration zones. RV dwellers are increasingly forced onto rural highways or into private land arrangements they cannot afford, creating a relentless cycle of displacement without housing exits or stabilization opportunities. New York's RV homelessness is concentrated around New York City, Long Island, and upstate industrial corridors, where housing costs have become prohibitive. While New York guarantees a right to shelter, that system primarily serves individuals, not vehicle dwellers. RV residents are often denied entry due to vehicle ownership, pets, or family status that disqualifies them under existing shelter rules. In 2025, New York City expanded enforcement of sanitation, parking, and zoning codes, specifically targeting RVs. Vehicles can be ticketed for remaining parked longer than 24 to 48 hours, and sanitation violations can trigger immediate towing. The average RV tow and impound in NYC exceeds $4,500, effectively confiscating housing and belongings simultaneously. The state also saw devastating layoffs across finance, media, and healthcare administration sectors. New York lost approximately 250,000 jobs since 2022, while median rent surpassed $3,200 in NYC. RV living became a desperate fallback for laid-off workers who could not access affordable housing fast enough to prevent displacement. Suburban counties followed city policy, closing park and ride lots and rest areas to overnight use. Enforcement is often framed as quality of life improvement, but no equivalent increase in housing placements occurred. RV dwellers are pushed farther from job centers and public transit, increasing unemployment rates and accelerating long-term homelessness. The system criminalizes housing instability rather than creating pathways to stability and permanent shelter. Washington state saw a rapid rise in RV living after housing costs in Seattle and surrounding counties doubled over a single decade. In 2025, enforcement escalated following court decisions allowing cities to clear encampments regardless of shelter availability. Seattle, Tacoma, Everett, and Spokane expanded RV-specific parking bans and designated tow-away zones throughout residential and commercial areas. Washington DOT closed multiple highway rest areas to overnight parking, eliminating traditional refuge spots for vehicle dwellers. Towing costs often exceed $5,000, while impound storage accrues additional daily fees. Once an RV is towed, financial recovery becomes impossible for most residents living paycheck to paycheck. The state lost tens of thousands of tech and logistics jobs post-2023. King County alone reported over 40,000 layoffs, while median rent remained above $2,600 monthly. RVs became de facto affordable housing for displaced workers until enforcement systematically removed them. Safe parking programs exist, but serve only a small fraction of actual need, often requiring background checks, vehicle registration, and employment verification. Many RV dwellers fail to qualify due to documentation gaps or employment instability. The result is forced mobility, with people moving every 24 to 72 hours, unable to stabilize work schedules or maintain medical care, while still being counted as addressed in official enforcement statistics. Washington's approach prioritizes clearance over housing solutions, accelerating the transition from vehicle shelter to complete street homelessness without offering alternatives. Texas officially banned public camping statewide in 2021, but enforcement intensified dramatically in 2025 as cities expanded vehicle habitation enforcement protocols. Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio increased RV sweeps near industrial zones and highway corridors. Texas cities frequently use obstruction or safety codes to justify immediate towing actions. Texas experienced significant layoffs across tech, energy services, and trucking logistics sectors. Despite lower average rents compared to coastal states, housing supply lagged population growth by hundreds of thousands of units. RV living rose sharply among working families priced out of apartments due to income requirements and credit screening. Unlike western states with accessible public lands, Texas offers extremely limited legal camping options. Overnight parking at rest areas is heavily restricted, and many counties criminalize sleeping in vehicles under local ordinances. RV dwellers are pushed into unincorporated zones without water, sanitation, or emergency services. Towing is often immediate and without warning. Recovery costs range from $2,500 to $7,000, effectively eliminating housing in a single enforcement action. Texas does not provide vehicle replacement assistance or alternative shelter placement. Once an RV is lost to impound, individuals typically enter street homelessness rather than traditional shelters due to strict rules, limited capacity, and incompatibility with families or medical needs. Texas enforcement prioritizes rapid clearance and visual management over housing solutions, converting temporary vehicle shelter into permanent displacement and accelerating the cycle of poverty and homelessness. Arizona has become a pressure release valve for housing displacement from California, Nevada, and Colorado. By 2025, Maricopa County alone recorded over 13,000 people living unsheltered, with a sharp rise in vehicle habitation. Phoenix rents increased roughly 40% since 2020, while wages in service, warehousing, and construction failed to keep pace. RV living became a survival strategy for laid-off workers, seniors on fixed incomes, and heat-vulnerable residents who could not safely sleep outdoors. In 2025, Arizona cities expanded enforcement using vehicle habitation, obstruction, and health code violations. Phoenix and Mesa now issue citations for sleeping in vehicles regardless of parking legality. After repeated notices, RVs are classified as abandoned and towed. Recovery costs often exceed $3,500, not including daily storage fees that accumulate rapidly. Arizona's extreme heat adds a lethal dimension to displacement. Temperatures above 110 degrees Fahrenheit make forced relocation dangerous and potentially deadly, yet enforcement continues year-round without consideration for weather conditions. Cooling centers often prohibit pets or personal vehicles, excluding many RV dwellers from accessing emergency relief. While Arizona has large amounts of public land, most Bureau of Land Management areas near cities are restricted or heavily patrolled. Job losses in construction and logistics since 2023 further increased financial instability. Without stable parking access, RV residents lose employment opportunities, healthcare continuity, and mail services. Arizona's approach prioritizes movement over solutions, turning temporary vehicle shelter into a rapid pipeline toward full-street homelessness. Colorado's RV homelessness grew rapidly as housing costs outpaced income growth along the Front Range corridor. By 2025, median rent in Denver exceeded $2,400 per month, while thousands of workers were laid off across tech startups, real estate, and tourism industries. RV living expanded among employed adults who could no longer qualify for apartments due to income thresholds or credit requirements. In response, cities strengthened enforcement rather than expanding housing access. Denver expanded its definition of unauthorized camping to include sleeping in vehicles, even when legally parked on public streets. Many municipalities imposed 72-hour parking limits, forcing constant relocation. Repeated violations trigger towing actions, with average recovery costs above $4,000, often exceeding the RV's actual resale value. Colorado's geography worsens displacement outcomes significantly. RV dwellers pushed out of cities migrate toward foothills, industrial corridors, or mountain towns where winter temperatures drop below 0 degrees. Cold exposure increases mechanical failures, medical emergencies, and fuel dependency that many cannot afford. Safe parking programs exist, but are capped and highly selective, serving only a small fraction of actual need. Many programs require proof of employment, vehicle insurance, and current registration. Documents often lost during displacement cycles. Colorado lost tens of thousands of jobs since 2023, shrinking program eligibility further. By criminalizing vehicle shelter without scaling housing supply, Colorado effectively converts working RV residents into unsheltered homeless individuals within months, not years, accelerating complete housing collapse. Oregon's RV homelessness expanded beyond Portland into Eugene, Salem, Medford, and coastal towns experiencing rapid rent increases. Rising rents, up more than 20% statewide since 2021, combined with layoffs in manufacturing, timber, and logistics, pushed many households into vehicles. RVs became transitional housing for people attempting to stay employed while searching for permanent housing solutions. In 2025, Oregon cities resumed large-scale RV removals after legal barriers were reduced through court decisions. Enforcement relies heavily on environmental, sanitation, and right-of-way codes, allowing authorities to cite RVs even when no criminal activity exists. Vehicles are tagged, issued short deadlines, and removed within days. Once towed, RVs are rarely recovered by their owners. Fees, repairs, and storage costs often exceed $5,000, instantly erasing both housing and personal savings. Unlike tents, RVs represent a major capital asset, and their loss accelerates complete economic collapse for occupants. Oregon's shelter system cannot absorb displaced vehicle dwellers. Many shelters restrict pets, couples, or people with medical needs that require accommodation. Rural areas offer virtually no alternatives, while coastal enforcement protects tourism zones from visible poverty. The state's approach replaces stability with forced mobility. RV residents lose jobs due to constant relocation requirements, then become categorized as chronically homeless despite having been housed weeks earlier inside functioning vehicles. Oregon's system criminalizes housing solutions rather than creating pathways to permanent shelter and stability. Nevada's RV homelessness is closely tied to extreme economic volatility in major cities. Las Vegas and Reno experienced sharp swings in hospitality, logistics, and construction employment. As rents climbed and work hours fluctuated, vehicle living increased among working adults who needed housing flexibility to survive unpredictable income patterns. In 2025, Clark County expanded enforcement targeting RVs near industrial parks, desert edges, and highway corridors. Officials cite safety, illegal dumping, and zoning concerns, even when vehicles are fully self-contained and legally parked. Enforcement often escalates from initial citations to immediate towing. Recovery costs range from $3,000 to $7,000, effectively eliminating housing in a single enforcement action. Nevada's extreme climate intensifies harm significantly. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making outdoor displacement extremely dangerous and potentially fatal. RVs provide essential shade, airflow, and refrigeration for life-sustaining medications, yet enforcement removes these critical protections. Cooling shelters are severely limited and frequently inaccessible to people with pets or significant belongings. Public land access is shrinking as counties restrict roadside parking and desert pull-offs previously used for temporary refuge. With few shelters and no statewide vehicle dweller protections, displaced individuals rapidly lose employment and fall into unsheltered homelessness. Nevada's system prioritizes visual clearance over long-term stability, accelerating the collapse of vehicle-based survival strategies. Once displaced, residents face nearly impossible odds of regaining housing without intervention. Utah's RV homelessness rose quietly as housing prices doubled over a single decade, while wages remained stagnant. By 2025, Salt Lake City rents surpassed $2,100 monthly, and layoffs across tech, construction, and retail sectors increased financial instability. RV living emerged among workers who could no longer bridge the widening gap between income and housing costs. Utah expanded enforcement through urban camping bans and restrictive parking ordinances. Sleeping in vehicles is increasingly classified as illegal camping, regardless of location or parking legality. RVs parked overnight face fines, relocation orders, and eventual towing actions. Shelter availability is severely limited and often incompatible with vehicle dwellers, especially couples and people with medical needs requiring accommodation. Utah's safe parking capacity is minimal compared to actual demand. Once an RV is removed through enforcement, individuals lose their only shelter and storage simultaneously. Utah's approach emphasizes rapid clearance to maintain city image and property values. Without sufficient affordable housing development, enforcement converts temporary vehicle shelter into long-term homelessness. The state records fewer visible encampments, but experiences higher rates of economic displacement and housing instability. Towing costs typically range from $3,000 to $5,000, making recovery impossible for low-income residents. Once displaced, families and individuals enter a cycle of street homelessness that is extremely difficult to escape. Utah's policy framework treats housing instability as a code enforcement problem rather than an economic crisis requiring comprehensive housing solutions and supportive services. Idaho experienced one of the fastest housing cost increases in the entire country. Boise area rents rose 30 to 40% in just a few years, driven by rapid in-migration and severely limited housing supply. Service workers, retirees, and fixed-income residents increasingly turn to RV living to remain near jobs and family networks. In 2025, Idaho cities expanded overnight parking bans and anti-camping ordinances throughout urban areas. Sleeping in vehicles is prohibited in many zones, including industrial areas previously tolerated by local authorities. Enforcement relies on parking duration limits and nuisance codes. Idaho offers extremely few shelters, especially outside major cities. Rural counties provide virtually no homeless services or emergency housing. RV dwellers pushed out of urban areas are forced into remote locations without water access, sanitation facilities, or emergency services. Winter temperatures regularly drop below freezing, making displacement dangerous and potentially deadly. RVs provide essential insulation and heating systems, yet enforcement removes these critical safeguards. Towing eliminates housing instantly, with recovery costs far beyond what low-wage workers can afford. Idaho's policy trajectory converts housing shortages into enforcement problems, replacing affordability solutions with forced invisibility. Once displaced, residents face nearly impossible odds of regaining housing stability. The state's approach prioritizes property values and tourism appeal over human welfare, accelerating the transition from temporary vehicle shelter to complete street homelessness. Without coordinated housing development and supportive services, Idaho's enforcement-only strategy increases long-term homelessness rather than resolving it. Montana's RV homelessness is driven less by urban collapse and more by severe housing supply shortages tied to rapid in-migration and tourism growth. Towns like Bozeman, Missoula, and Kalispell saw home prices rise over 60% in 5 years, while rental availability fell into single-digit vacancy rates. Service workers, seasonal employees, and retirees increasingly turned to RVs as their only viable housing option. In 2025, cities intensified enforcement to protect tourism optics and downtown redevelopment projects. Overnight parking restrictions and zoning enforcement are now used to remove RVs from city limits. Unlike larger states, Montana offers almost no shelter capacity, especially outside winter emergency periods. Seasonal layoffs worsen housing instability significantly. Tourism and construction employment drops sharply in shoulder seasons, leaving RV residents without income just as enforcement peaks. Cold weather adds serious survival risk. Winter temperatures routinely fall below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and displacement often forces RVs into unplowed rural roads or isolated forest edges. Montana's vast land creates the illusion of available space, but most areas lack access to water, fuel, or emergency services. When RVs are sited or towed, recovery is nearly impossible due to long distances and limited impound access. Recovery costs typically exceed $4,000, making reclamation financially impossible. The state's approach preserves tourism image and land values while quietly pushing vehicle dwellers into increasingly dangerous isolation. Montana's enforcement converts temporary housing solutions into life-threatening displacement without offering alternatives. Georgia's RV homelessness has expanded alongside rising rents in metro Atlanta and surrounding suburban counties. Median rents increased 25% or more since 2021, while layoffs across logistics, warehousing, and media sectors left many households without stable income. RV living emerged among working adults attempting to stay near employment hubs. In 2025, counties increased encampment sweeps and zoning enforcement specifically targeting vehicles. RVs are frequently cited for improper use, sanitation violations, or commercial zoning infractions, even when legally parked on public streets. Repeated citations lead to removal orders or immediate towing. Georgia's shelter system is fragmented and often inaccessible to vehicle dwellers. Many shelters restrict length of stay, exclude couples, or require daytime exit, making employment maintenance extremely difficult. RV dwellers who lose their vehicles fall directly into street homelessness without transitional support. Suburban enforcement is especially aggressive, with coordinated actions between police departments and code enforcement officers. Once displaced, RV residents are pushed farther from public transit and employment centers, accelerating unemployment. Georgia's response prioritizes containment and relocation over housing stabilization. Towing costs range from $3,000 to $6,000, making vehicle recovery impossible for most low-income residents. Once an RV is lost, individuals lose shelter, transportation, and storage simultaneously. Georgia's approach quietly converts economic hardship into criminal enforcement issues, increasing long-term homelessness rather than providing pathways to housing stability and economic recovery. South Carolina's RV homelessness is closely tied to persistently low wages and rising housing costs in coastal and metro areas. Charleston, Greenville, and Myrtle Beach experienced rent increases exceeding 30% since 2020, while service sector wages remained near the national minimum. Retirees and seasonal workers increasingly turned to RVs as affordable housing. In 2025, enforcement expanded under public space management and tourism protection policies. Overnight parking bans and beach area restrictions are strictly enforced to maintain visual standards. RVs are removed to protect property values and tourism revenue, particularly in high-traffic zones. The state offers minimal shelter alternatives, and rural counties provide almost none. Displaced RV dwellers are often forced onto highway corridors or private lots they cannot afford long-term. Once an RV is sited or towed, recovery costs quickly exceed personal savings. Hurricane season adds significant risk to enforcement policies. RV residents forced to move frequently cannot secure safe evacuation locations when storms threaten. South Carolina's enforcement strategy protects tourism revenue while exposing vehicle dwellers to environmental and economic danger without viable housing exits. Towing costs typically range from $2,500 to $5,000, making recovery financially impossible for most residents. Once displaced, individuals lose shelter, transportation, and belongings simultaneously. South Carolina's approach prioritizes visual management over human welfare, converting temporary housing solutions into permanent displacement. Without coordinated housing development, the state's enforcement-only strategy increases long-term homelessness and emergency service costs. Ohio's RV homelessness is linked directly to manufacturing and logistics layoffs across mid-sized cities, experiencing economic decline. Job losses combined with rising rents, up 20% or more in urban areas, pushed more people into vehicle living. RVs offered a temporary bridge for displaced workers seeking re-employment opportunities. In 2025, cities expanded camping bans and parking enforcement that specifically include vehicles. RVs parked overnight are ticketed under nuisance or obstruction codes. Repeat violations lead to towing and impound actions. Ohio's shelter capacity is insufficient, particularly for families and medically vulnerable individuals requiring accommodation. Many RV dwellers lose access to employment once displaced from stable parking locations, making rehousing significantly harder. Winter weather increases mechanical failures and health risks. Towing costs range from $2,500 to $5,000, making vehicle recovery impossible for most low-income residents. Once an RV is lost, individuals often enter long-term homelessness, actually increasing public costs rather than reducing them. Ohio's system moves people out of sight, but not into housing. The state's approach prioritizes visual management over comprehensive solutions. Without coordinated housing development and employment support, Ohio's enforcement strategy converts temporary vehicle shelter into permanent street homelessness. Recovery from RV loss is nearly impossible without significant financial assistance. Ohio's policy framework treats housing instability as a code enforcement problem rather than an economic crisis requiring intervention, increasing long-term displacement and emergency service utilization. Kentucky enacted a statewide ban on urban camping that fully impacts RV dwellers throughout 2025. Sleeping in vehicles is treated as unlawful camping in many jurisdictions. Enforcement is now consistent across cities, eliminating local tolerance zones previously used for temporary refuge. Layoffs across healthcare support, logistics, and manufacturing sectors combined with housing shortages pushed more residents into vehicles. RV living became a last defense against total homelessness for working families and fixed-income residents. Kentucky's shelter network is severely limited and uneven across regions. Many areas offer no year-round options for homeless residents. Once an RV is removed through enforcement, individuals lose shelter, transportation, and storage at once. Enforcement emphasizes legal compliance over survival needs, accelerating displacement without providing alternatives. Kentucky's approach replaces housing instability with criminal penalties, turning economic hardship into a cycle that is nearly impossible to escape without intervention. Towing costs typically range from $2,500 to $5,000, making vehicle recovery financially impossible for most residents. Once displaced, families enter street homelessness with few pathways to stability. Kentucky's policy framework prioritizes clearance over housing solutions. Without coordinated affordable housing development and supportive services, Kentucky's enforcement-only strategy increases long-term homelessness and associated public costs. The state's approach treats vehicle dwelling as a criminal issue rather than an economic crisis requiring comprehensive intervention and housing development. This isn't a future problem. It's already happening, and it's accelerating. If you or someone you know has been affected by RV crackdowns or job loss, share your story in the comments and watch our next video where we reveal the laws and enforcement moves that are about to change everything.